Hello everybody, and welcome to your weekly news wrap-up. This week we've got everything from Baldur's Gate 3 somehow getting even better, Pixels selling for $1 million, and of course the rapidly approaching Summer Game Fest, which I'll be covering this weekend and into next week. For now, let's get the bad news out of the way first. Behavior Interactive is adding to the 45 people it laid off in January by 95 more, and once again the Montreal studio is taking the brunt of the hit. The reason stated in the press release was so the company could focus on its historical strengths. Whatever the hell that means. It's just PR drivel with no real substance or relevance, though I do find it interesting that a focus on historical strengths apparently also means buying up not one, not two, not three, but 4 separate studios in the past 2 years, on top of opening a new studio and a new office in Toronto. Furthermore, despite laying off over 100 people in their Montreal studio, these guys apparently also still need to hire 16 people, according to their own job postings. Earlier in January, Behavior claimed that they prefer to reassign developers rather than lay them off, but apparently out of the 150 people that they've laid off, not a single one of them can fit into the required roles that they need at the Montreal office. Behavior Interactive is mostly known for Dead by Daylight, which was launched almost 8 years ago at this point. From 2015 to 2019, Behavior released 12 different games. And from 2020 to 2024, the exact same time frame of 4 years, they've released 5 games. That's a more than 50% drop in the studio's output, despite growing their numbers from 575 to over 1,300 employees, as well as buying up the aforementioned 5 studios and opening a new office. If this buy studios, lay people off, and reduce your game's output strategy sounds familiar, that's because it is. Obviously, I have no idea what Behavior Interactive's plan is, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to learn that the studio was shopping itself around looking for buyers. Or maybe it's just incompetent mismanagement from the top. These days, the two are often indistinguishable. In any case, Behavior Interactive may be an indie company, but their recent actions are more in line with the lifeless giants in the industry, and my spidey sense is telling me something is up. And it doesn't stop there. The hits for Montreal's gaming studios don't stop, as Avalanche, mostly known for Just Cause, has also announced this week that they're closing down the entire Montreal office as well as their New York office. This comes on the heels of Avalanche's acquisition of Monster Close Games in Montreal just last October, meaning the Montreal studio only lasted 8 months under Avalanche's leadership. Yet another studio gobbled up and then dismantled, and although this kind of thing is more expected from a company like Warner Brothers who owns Avalanche, it doesn't really lessen the sting. The entirety of 2023 saw around 10,500 total games industry layoffs for the whole year. We're only 5 months into 2024, and now the tally is at 10,200-ish or so, meaning in the last 2 years, over 20,000 games industry workers have lost their jobs. Baldur's Gate 3 will finally be getting official mod support starting this September. While a precise date wasn't given, in a post over on Steam this week, Larian did lay out a number of specifics regarding the mod tools, processes, and availability. Patch 7, which will launch said mod support, is also aiming to release the much-anticipated improved evil endings, as well as some smaller features like photo mode and mods.io integration so console players can download and use mods. But if you're interested in making mods instead of just playing them, you'll need to do that on PC. As for the mod support itself, Larian looks to be putting in a good deal of thought into making sure player and maker expectations are addressed as well as can be. I already mentioned mods.io for console players and official mods, but as anyone who has spent more than a few seconds looking up mods knows, there are a ton of, shall we say, more risque mods out there, and I'm not just talking about the obvious make all characters naked type mods. Aside from the usual degeneracy, there are plenty of heavy-handed scripting mods and mods that include adult themes that would immediately cause problems for a console release, either by being too adult in nature or by simply adding things to the game that Larian doesn't want to support. In those instances, Larian has assured modders that players can, and I quote, "Changes that won't be officially supported within our pipeline, like scripting changes and not safe for work mods that wouldn't pass the moderation process due to platform-specific restrictions, may still be packed locally with mod.io's toolset and uploaded to other mod distribution platforms. This means that those mods can still be downloaded manually, and the game's browser will still recognize them and allow you to manage them in the mod load order for the game. However, because they would be local and alter unsupported systems, there will not be embedded support for checking for updates and syncing to others in a multiplayer session. Additionally, we will not be able to provide full technical support in cases of crashes." All in all, it seems Larian is treating the modding scene with a fair bit of care. If the tools are as robust as everyone is hoping for, there may be a new king of mods eventually to dethrone Skyrim. Finally. So every week there are tons of announcements, reveals, teasers, and announcements of announcements. Sifting through it all to decide what to cover and what to discard each week necessitates some kind of rule. For me, I have a few guidelines that help me figure out what to include and what to bookmark for a later date. These personal rules result in a lot of general game announcements, demos, and early access stuff getting tossed to the wayside. That said, sometimes something comes along that does catch my attention so much that it makes me want to cover it. The Blueprints is just such a game. Although it was announced a couple months ago, it wasn't until this week that I heard of it, and I was instantly interested. Rather than summarize the game's concept, let me read this directly from the Steam page. As the heir of Mount Holly, you have been tasked to explore its shifting halls in search of Room 46. Yet as your journey takes you further into the mansion's depths, you start to discover that there is more lurking under the surface than a missing room. Investigate a past woven with the threads of blackmail, political intrigue, and the mysterious disappearance of a local children's book author. The deeper you venture, the more you realize that the past is closer than it appears. Your progress each day is shaped by the rooms you select to draft and the tools you find within them. Items in the game can be used in a number of creative ways to fuel your exploration deeper into the house, allowing you to adopt unique strategies to combat the challenges that each day brings. Yet tread wisely. The house resets each dawn, erasing all but the permanent upgrades to your estate blueprint. That is, if you were clever enough to find one. The hook here is that every time you go to open a new door in the mansion, a kind of card-based roguelike system pops up and it gives you 3 different options of the type of room that you'll create when you open the door. So, as you explore, you pick the path that is created, and since each room type has different pros and cons, you have to strategically think about what your goal is for any specific run. Obviously, as the game doesn't even have a release date yet, there's not a lot to go on outside of the reveal trailer, but the premise itself immediately grabbed me, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this. The first previews of Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree DLC are trickling in, and to no one's surprise, it's looking to be an incredible addition to an already incredible game. Without getting too close to spoiler territory, here are a handful of things I noticed that were in common with most of the early previews. The world itself, while about the size of Limgrave in terms of explorable area, feels far more alien and wrong than the Lands Between did, and considering how bizarre the Lands Between were, that's quite a statement. Previewers almost universally reveled in the crazy amount of new spells, weapons, and gear added in the expansion, and in many cases, these new additions dramatically altered the combat feel in some unexpected and exciting ways, such as the inclusion of the dry leaf arts. Remember in the trailer where you see the badass high kick? Apparently that style of combat which dry leaf arts implements is far deeper than anyone really expected. Less surprising, though definitely welcome to hear, is that after 3 hours the previewers were given to play the game, almost every one of them walked away feeling that they had barely scratched the surface. In true FromSoft fashion, the DLC is shaping up to be a difficult one, with the recommended starting level for the Land of Shadow being 150. There are also some small requirements that you need to meet in the base game before you're able to access the new area. Fortunately, for those of us without preview access, we won't have to wait much longer as the Shadow of the Erdtree drops June 21st this year, less than 3 weeks away, thankfully. Here's another announcement that caught my attention this week. Closer the Distance. Developed by Osmotic Studios, the team behind the fantastic Orwell Keeping an Eye on You, Closer the Distance is a narrative slice-of-life sim with a really cool art style. Like most introverted gamers, life sims are a genre that I routinely return to, and although the army of Stardew clones is a little overwhelming these days, Closer the Distance focus on a more melancholy story, coupled with its art style, looks like a great addition to the formula. Though it should be noted that Closer the Distance looks to be more like The Sims plus Oxenfree rather than any kind of farming or crafting sim. And this is another one I'm definitely going to be excited to see where its development goes. Content Warning has reached over 2.2 million in sales. This is the multiplayer horror game that released earlier in April and then proceeded to take over Twitch and YouTube. At this point, there's not much else to add, as the game's unique take on the Phasmophobia style of gameplay is pretty well documented, but I do love watching these indie companies succeed. Congrats. Enshrouded, the open-world survival craft game that launched into early access this January, is getting its second big update after hitting 2 million players in just a month. Developer Keen Games has been hard at work delivering content updates, which started in March with the Hollow Halls update that added some harder dungeon-like content, as well as a number of other features like new quests, enemies, and weapons. This month's update is adding a variety of instruments to craft and play, the Blackmire sub-biome, as well as a scattering of fixes and quality of life updates. Of course, the game is still in early access, and it isn't expected to leave for at least a year or so. Considering how active the developers have been, it's safe to say that there'll be a mountain of content to look forward to down the road when the game launches. In some quick Destiny 2 news, the final shape has launched this week to predictable instability. And while that kind of thing is par for the course these days, when you're releasing a 10-year-long story finale and people are being disconnected during the campaign or just straight up not being shown multiple cutscenes, that's kinda bad. Last night, Bungie tweeted an apology as well as noting that some issues had already been fixed. However, as of this morning, June 5th, players are still reporting connection issues. Hopefully Bungie can get that fixed and players can go back to enjoying this finale. In a quick follow-up to last week's Helldivers story, the planet of Meridia is no more, or at least seemingly no more. Where the planet once was, now a black hole resides, pulling in anything that gets too close. Now, of course, theories abound that it's not actually a black hole, or at least not a black hole as we think about them in the real world. The Illuminate are a long-awaited enemy from Helldivers 1 that fans have suspected would return. Considering that the black hole was created using dark fluid, which was Illuminate tech captured in the First War, it's not a stretch to guess that this black hole is a little bit more than it seems. Probably some sort of portal for the Illuminate to return through. If Game Master Joel knows, though, he sure isn't telling, so more on this story as it progresses. In other Helldivers news, Catherine Baskin, Arrowhead's social media and community manager, detailed the studio's direction in regards to patches and war bonds, which can be wrapped up in one quote: "It's time to focus on quality over quantity." Sentiment that is definitely going to be welcomed in the Helldivers community given the growing trend of patches that break just as much as they fix, on top of last month's poorly received war bond. And speaking of war bonds, June's Viper Commando theme was revealed, and not only does it look pretty cool, but it also has a few new types of cosmetics for your extraction shuttle, Hellpod, and mechs. The usual weapons, armors, capes, emotes, and boosters are also packed into the war bond as well, of course. As good as it is to hear that the studio is pulling back and taking more time with releases, I'm still waiting on Sony to unlock the purchase restrictions from, half the damn world. Until then, I guess we rock and stone. IllFonic, the team behind Ghostbusters, Spirit Unleashed, and Predator Hunting Ground, has returned to the movie crossover asymmetric multiplayer genre with Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Based on the 1988 movie, which I've never seen but I kind of want to now, the game revolves around the usual asymmetric gameplay model of bad guys versus good guys. Though it should be noted that in this one, the good guy players have a few more tools to actually fight back than is often the case in something like Dead by Daylight. In Killer Clowns from Outer Space, you'll take the role of one of the killer clowns hunting the humans for the invasion, or one of the humans fighting back to survive said invasion. The split is 3 clowns versus 7 humans for a 10-person lobby. As of this writing, the game is setting at mostly positive on Steam with about 1,500 reviews, with many reviewers praising the wacky yet often intense combat while lamenting the game's bugs. Fortunately, IllFonic has announced plans to patch out some of the problems as soon as possible. This August, Sony will be releasing a PC adapter for the PlayStation VR 2, which will allow it to play Steam games. While the PS5 features such as eye tracking, adaptive triggers, HDR, and headset feedback won't be available when playing Steam games, I doubt many people are gonna be too upset given how many games they're gonna now have access to on Steam. Having the ability to play Half-Life Alyx on PS5 alone is huge, not to mention every other good VR title. This move is just another in a long line of Sony testing the waters of the PC market. Their stated goal is to tempt PC players to the PlayStation 5, and while I and the internet at large find that goal largely optimistic to say the least, anything that gives gamers more games to play and enjoy is a win in my book. Ubisoft Toronto will be joining Ubisoft Montreal to hopefully get the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake finally out the door. For those out of the loop, the remake was originally being developed by Ubisoft Mumbai and Ubisoft Pune when it was announced way back in 2020. After just a handful of months, the original January 2021 release date was pushed back to March 2021, and then in February it was delayed indefinitely. And now we're in mid-2024, we're learning that yet another studio is being brought on board for development. For all of us hoping for a top-tier remake to the classic, it's looking more and more grim. These kinds of development troubles almost never end well. Hopefully the devs can bring it together and continue the recent trend of good Prince of Persia games. I'm really looking forward to a classic being remade for modern audiences. A launch trailer for the Riven remake, a sequel to the point-and-click classic Myst game, hit the internet this week, and it looks quite nice. Cyan Worlds, the original devs that are still around and kicking, also released a Myst remake earlier in 2021 that can also be played in VR. I've never played these games myself, but I actually just wishlisted Myst because these are the sorts of VR experiences that A, don't nauseate me and make me want to vomit, and B, they're just really cool to explore these sorts of worlds in VR. Anyway, if you're interested in playing the sequel, it will be launching June 25th this year. I didn't have time to cover Celico last week, but this early access boomer shooter looks fun as hell. The fear-influenced shooter advertises a lengthy story-driven campaign, clever AI, and professional voice acting as just a few selling points on top of mod support. Currently, the game sits at a very positive rating over on Steam, with developer Altered Orbit Studios stating that they're aiming for a late 2026 release. I typically avoid early access titles, at least as a player, but between stuff like this and Hades 2, my patient gamer instinct has been struggling to maintain its composure. Soul Mask is an open-world survival craft game that has hit 100k sales in less than 48 hours. This one slipped under my radar, but it looks pretty promising. I've been playing way too much V-Rising lately, and the first thing that caught my attention was the ability to yoink abilities out of the enemies in the same way that you drain powerful blood from bosses in V-Rising. While you can play solo or with AI-driven companions that you can use to automate different tasks, there are also open tribal warfare PvP modes for the competitive-minded. The early access period will last for a minimum of 1 year, so expect a bit of a wait if you're not an early access enjoyer. Okay, so here's a weird one for you. IKEA is going to start paying about 10 new employees to work in their Roblox game store. Yeah, that's a thing. If you're 18 plus and located in the UK or the Republic of Ireland, you can apply for the position, and if you're picked, you can expect to earn $13.15 an hour in UK dollar dues, which is about $16.78 in American dollars. Now obviously this is fully remote work, and it's also a limited contract, but still, what a time to be alive. As a virtual IKEA employee, you'll be able to help customers find furniture in the digital showroom, as well as serve meatballs in the store's bistro. If you're asking why, and frankly you will alarm me if you haven't asked that, well, here's what IKEA has to say about it. We're excited to be the first brand to launch paid work on Roblox to showcase how we do careers differently, bringing our unique career philosophy to life. At IKEA, there is no set route to career progression. Our coworkers are able to change roles, switch departments, and grow in any direction they choose, both in the game or in the real world. There are many ways to learn and grow at IKEA, and that's what IKEA on Roblox is all about. So there you have it. We're one tiny step closer to our sci-fi future, whether utopian or dystopian, I'll leave that up to you. At this point, it feels like every week I'm doing some sort of mention about another game-to-screen adaptation that's been announced. This week's is Sega's Like a Dragon series, which is getting a live-action adaptation with a 6-part show on Amazon Prime this year. Titled Like a Dragon Yakuza, the show will be set in 1995 and 2005 and will follow series hero Kiryu Kazuma and will debut the first 3 episodes this October 25th. Oh, and also, I'm just going to throw this here, a trailer for the Netflix show of Tomb Raider also launched this week for even more game-to-screen adaptations. Here's another bizarre one. Machorium? Muscle Aquarium Simulator? Yep, it's a game where you decorate an aquarium and fill it with small muscular men, which generate a currency that allows you to buy more decorations for your aquarium. Okay, sure. Why not? And finally, tomorrow kicks off the Summer Game Fest and all the showcases and reveals that come along with it. Although the reveal season is always pretty exciting, Jeff Keighley is already trying to temper expectations. During a Twitch Q&A this week, Keighley cautioned that the bulk of reveals in this summer's Game Fest will be updates to existing games and/or trailers to previously announced titles. If you are interested in watching any of the showcases, here's the schedule. I'm going to pop it up on screen right now. Give it a pause if you need to. Otherwise, I'm going to be releasing at least 1, if not 2 or 3 videos covering everything that's going to be announced this weekend and moving into next week. I've already covered Sony's State of Play that happened last week, so give that a look if you want to see everything that was talked about. Otherwise, I'll be back next weekend with the standard weekly news. Stay safe out there, folks.